Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
G'day, how you going? It's Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Hope you're well. Getting back into what I like doing, that's chatting to property investors, mapping their journey as they invest in property, looking to create some wealth. And what I do particularly like is chatting to investors who have been on the show beforehand. And this show now has been going, God, I have to call it nearly 10 years. Maybe that long, but it's pretty long. We've been sort of narrating the growth of property in Australia and speaking to investors and professionals who work within it to give some sense of what's going on and how it all works. Our guest today has been in the studio a couple of times. The last time was before COVID, if anyone can remember that, which is now sort of quite some time before us, in 2019, when he was in here. We had a good chat. You can go and tune into it. Just search the archives there. You'll track it down. But he's back in the studio to give us an update on his portfolio. I've managed to persuade him to come in. It's a bigger portfolio today, and I'm sure he'll give us some sense of what's going on. Mitchell Burge, how you going?
Good. It's good to be back. I think, 5 years. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
It's a different world now.
Yeah, it is a different world, and you're still at it. You're in the air conditioning game.
Yes, I am.
Is that what you call it? Air conditioning?
Air conditioning.
Isn't it? Or is it more mechanical? Is it mechanical and
mechanical ventilation?
Mechanical ventilation.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
You only do resi stuff or commercial or everything?
We do everything, the resi through to some of the largest buildings here.
Yeah, that's cool. How's business?
Business is in some ways better than we've ever seen. In other ways, in the resi market, it's nearly dead.
Okay.
So if you haven't got your hands in the commercial market, I'd be worried.
Yeah. Okay. So you're doing a lot of commercial work at the moment, just what, big buildings? And,
we've got about 180 large building contracts.
Wow. What's the name of your business?
Licensed to chill air conditioning.
It's a pretty cool name.
It is.
Licensed to chill. So no one's doing resi stuff at the moment?
I think from what I can tell, even on the upper North Shore, the Pymble, the Clara areas, it's almost like under COVID there was a lot of savings, and it feels to me like the savings have run dry, and the interest rates that we've seen for a long time now are only just starting to really bite.
Yeah, okay.
And then you got the inflation, which is not getting under control, not properly anyway. And it's like it's been at a delayed sort of pain, I guess you'd call it. Yeah, okay. Because we've never seen. I've never seen this in not even 2007 and 9 was like this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, shifting sands, they reckon now inflation's coming down, and whether or not they've got it under control, I need to wait until the next inflation data comes out over the next few periods because, it might have got into the target band for a moment in time, but whether or not it stays there and whether or not that will prompt the Reserve Bank to start slicing rates, which a lot of the banks are now factoring in, probably not this year, but early next year. You're sitting around waiting for an interest rate cut, Mitch?
I'm actually on the other side because interest rate cut means to me the market's going to run.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to buy right now. I'd like to do some more next year. Yeah. And that means it's going to push the prices up on whatever I want to buy. So with my plan, I actually don't want anything to change for a little while. Yeah.
Which is funny, right? Like, depends what lens you view it through. But it's good buying right now, and you particularly you see it in the Sydney market just the last couple of weeks of spring selling season. There's a lot more stock on market and a lot less buyers out there, so it's certainly moved into a buyer's market. And I'm seeing some properties sell. I'm going, if that was selling back in the COVID days, it'd be a very different price. But if you're buying at the moment, it's good buying, particularly the prestige stuff as well, from what I've seen.
Everywhere. Well, it's a lendability. If you look at the median house in Sydney and what it's worth, and what kind of income somebody would have even to buy your median income, median valued place, most people can't afford it. Yeah. So they just can't get the finance. So if somebody's got to cash out with these rates in this situation right now, there's some real bargains. And that's why I'm starting to line up.
You're just not ready. You just wanted to be the market to maintain as it is right now before you give it a go. Yeah, I'm sort of in a similar position where I'm getting set to do some stuff. I'm just not ready right now. But when I do, I still hope it's a very similar environment. I don't want ramp buying on the way up. I'd rather buy when prices are sort of plateaued a fair bit, particularly where I want to be buying. But that's not the purpose of today's chat. Here to talk about your portfolio. Mitch, I've known you for a decade plus, I would imagine.
Well over a decade now.
Maybe even 15 years.
15.
Just through very different means. And you come onto the podcast, I think, real early days when you were but a young property investor. Now you're not an old property investor, but you're sort of, you're part way through your journey. You have a very good, successful SME business, and obviously gives some free cash flow that you've chosen to deploy into property, which is a really good and traditional way for business owners to actually create wealth. This old adage of make your money in business and park it in property. If you've got something that generates good income and good capital and deploying it into other asset classes, property, it sounds like it's been good for you, mate.
Yeah, it still works. And it was from the original one. It was from a fishing trip with Alex Whitlock.
Yeah, that's right.
To then the article you released all those years ago, 10 properties in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think we smashed that in 3 years or something.
It's crazy. It was a lot easier back then, though, wasn't it?
Very easy.
Yeah. Lending was easy.
It'll come back.
It'll come back, yeah. And this is the point around interest rates. There's a lot of discussions on now whether or not they still should be applying this buffer on top of serviceability, where whatever the interest rate is, they're putting still 3% on it. So most people are getting assessed at 9 and 10% interest rates, and in many ways that's stifling a lot of people's ability to invest or keep investing. But you've seen the other side of that, where it's a bit of a challenge on refinancing because banks just feel as though they've got you by the short and curlies going, you won't be able to refinance anywhere else because of your serviceability, so I'm not going to give you competitive interest rates.
Yeah, the mortgage handcuffs. I love the banks. I got a loan at 18 for $500,000 for my first property. So as much as we hate them, we need them and we can't live without them. But it was the first time I'd ever experienced the raw edge of the banks, where I owed the bank a lot of money. My LVR was still healthy. I had cash in the bank. I was making profit. But their requirements for the debt I already had moved. The lendability had moved. So when they ratcheted their rates too far, for example, Macquarie's SMF went up over 10%.
That's
and
crazy.
So did St. George. It's crazy. And when I reached out to them, even though St. George, 20 years of good business, love the bank, got a account manager, reached out and said, we've got to do something about some of these loans. I tried to refinance, and despite being in what I saw as a pretty good position, they said, sorry, sir, we can't help you. So you had those mortgage handcuffs where I was paying up to 10% on some loans because they keep ratcheting above market, and you can't get away. And the reason there's not blood on the streets or people going bankrupt is what it does is it forces people to sell. And it's not like they go bankrupt. They get a cash injection on the way out. But this is where I've witnessed the middle class disappearing, where it was everybody's dream to have your house and an investment property. I've witnessed a lot of friends have to offload that investment property. And that's one of the things to chat about today. There's always a way. You can take a second job, and if you can hold and fight and do whatever you have to and duck and weave and just hold, there's another side to it.
Yeah, and I think your portfolio and the growth in your portfolio is a testament to this sort of notion of holding. But so you're in they were in SMSF loans up over 10%.
Oh, they still are. I'm moving them now. I'm in currently finishing the biggest refinance I've ever done. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do is work really hard, get the figures to where they need to be, hit the market. My long-time accountant, Munzrel, Kershab accountant.
Munzrel. I do a podcast now with Munzrel. Have you listened to it? Called In the Balance.
I haven't, but that man is the executor of my will and a good friend and a mentor, like you and Alex have been. And he Janine refinanced everything across and got us to some better rates, which I wish the banks could have done directly. And what the most frustrating thing was, to add salt to the wound, was as quick as those discharge documents were issued to the banks, and it was about 16 in one hit, that bank manager returned straight back to me saying, can we talk? I will beat their rates. And despite the complexity of this trust and the setup and all the paperwork, I said no. So we stuck by Janine. She put in an awful lot of work for this. I appreciate it. It's still not complete, but it's the payments of what it's done for us and dropped is phenomenal.
So there's a real cash flow, and we'll talk about the equity and the growth in your portfolio, but what we're talking about is cash flow here, and cash flow being the mechanism or the utility to hold property in order to get the capital growth. So, there's two sides of property investing. It's asset growth, and then there's the cost to hold the properties, particularly if you have debt on them. So most of your loans with a handful of lenders, were they?
I went off the old rule many years ago that I learnt from you guys. I wasn't comfortable dealing with one bank. That way, if one bank decided they didn't like you, there was a problem, they could foreclose on you too early or easily and exercise their all monies clause. So by dealing with a lot of banks, I felt like I had my hand in a lot of pies, and we've never missed a payment ever. So I just felt like if one bank ever came into hard times or started exercising that all monies clause, we could very easily move everything across. So I wanted quite a few, but with the legislation now, it's a bit harder for the banks, and I'm a bit more comfortable doing business more with one bank.
Yeah, okay.
If needed to, a lot more comfortable than I used to be doing that. And funny enough, I'd never really done business with the NAB, but they gave me really good rates.
Yeah, I'd never really done a lot with NAB in the past, and now they're my primary banker.
Yeah, it just happened.
And
I don't know how.
I found really good, and I'm locked in with the private bank crew over there, and they've been really, really good. Like really, really good. I actually have quite a lot of loans with NAB right now, and I also have a much wider spread of banks now. I'm a little bit more consolidated. I probably still have 3 to 4 sort of banks that I have mortgage debt with, but I'm pretty heavy on NAB these days, and I've found them to be really good. This is not a plug for NAB at all, and I sort of note, and I agree with your sentiment around the banks. I hold bank shares, all bank shares I hold shares in. I want them to perform. I think the banks in Australia do great service to Australians and as a vehicle for wealth creation, whether it's in their super or whether or not it's a mechanism for debt to support growth. But on the other side, while I absolutely adore banks and think they're great, I'll give them a hard time where they've got to be given a hard time and try and hold them accountable where I can. And I've had many discussions over this podcast over many years where my sentiments towards the bank probably isn't as positive as they are. Largely, I land on the point of going, keep doing the good jobs that you do, banks. Australia's banks are some of the best in the world. We saw that through COVID, and the integrity around our banking system is strong, which is great. But you've got to work your banks, and you've got to sometimes have a frustrating relationship with banks because they're in the business of making money. They're not going to be giving you cheaper rates just because they want to be good guys and girls. You've got to fight for it. So you've shifted. So you've refinanced a lot over the NAB, have you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many loans have you moved to NAB?
We're still in the process, but it'll be, I think, 15 or 16 by the end of this month.
Oh, that's okay. So that's a big chunk, right?
But your comment that you said before, how you spread, because you guys were the ones that taught me over quite a few. What I'm noticing, which it sounds like you're the same, you do it without noticing. You pull back into a bank that looks after you once your LVR is low and you feel more secure. Yeah. When your LVR is high and the portfolio is not mature and it's you feel a bit not as comfortable with it, and you're worried that somebody could foreclose, say you're running an 85 or a 90 in the early days, that's when I feel that you need the safety numbers.
You need the safety numbers, and often banks, when you're starting off investing in property, if you want to build a larger portfolio, you get to a point, with most banks where they go, there's no more money for you, right? Yes. And they just go, you're just outside of their lending criteria because you don't have a lot of equity, maybe your earning isn't sufficient, so you need to move to another bank. And typically you start with a Big Four bank, then you might move to another Big Four bank and then another Big Four bank, and then you start going, I need to start diversifying the way in which I hold my properties and getting into more complicated structures. Often the banks won't lend you any more money, and then you need to go to a second tier or a mid-tier bank, and then typically after that you'll go to like maybe a non-conforming type of bank or banks that do sort of less documentation. And normally that's how most people grow. And then they get to a point where they go, hey, I don't need to be paying a premium on my interest rates anymore because I'm a much better customer, with a much better portfolio, much better equity. I'll rationalise. And it sounds like you've done that or doing that right now.
It's been a journey, but it's interesting. I couldn't have put it better forward what you mentioned. When you realise you actually have a low LVR, a good record, and you bring value to the bank, and you realise that you're in a position to properly negotiate. Yeah, it's
called leverage, right? It's called leverage,
yeah.
and when you have a lot of loans with a particular bank, there's pros and cons to that. If they're not accommodating and keeping their interest rates sharp, they know guys like you and me. There's a lot of work to actually move your loan, so they go, oh well, good luck, go for it. However, with that leverage though, you need to remember banks are in the business of lending money to people who will pay the debt. That's what they like, particularly interest-only lending. It's money for jam for them. So you want them to be competitive, but you also got to be a really good client. You got to pay your loans, you got to do the right thing, you got to continue to do it. So you're down this refinancing process now.
Yes.
I've done it myself recently. It's a headache.
Yes. Worth it.
It's worth it, absolutely worth it. So why is it worth it? Well, this is about holding your properties for long-term capital growth. Welcome back, Phil Tarrant, chatting with Mitchell Burge. Mitch, who I've known for many years, and it's great to see this portfolio he's creating as he's embarked on investing in property. I remember chatting to you probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and you were really sort of frustrated because you felt stuck in a lot of properties in Queensland. I think we started investing around a similar-ish sort of time.
You were a year before. I followed.
Yeah. Western suburbs of Sydney, and we were sort of like younger investors, and we thought, wow, this is pretty good, isn't it? Like you just do that and it just goes up. So when essentially Western suburbs of Sydney become not the best place to be deploying the money, we all moved up to Queensland. And
probably too early.
Yeah, probably too early, but maybe at the right time, who knows?
Yeah.
But it wasn't the right time to be investing in Sydney anymore. So, the view was that Queensland was the next place, and we all bought a fair bit of property up there, and then nothing happened. And I remember chatting with you, and you're going, this property investments, it's all BS, it doesn't work, and this, that, and the other, and it's funny how your perception changes over time.
Brisbane has, I don't even have words for what's happened there. It's exactly what you said. It stalled for too long.
Yeah.
And then the government that's in there obviously is running a massive deficit, and it seems that despite most of their property in around the Logan areas and the Ipswich and all of that is owned by investors mostly from Sydney, they tried to put their hands in our pockets too many times. They've brought in too much compliance for landlords. We just pass it on. The landlord always wins. So we pass on those expenses, but then the holding expenses kept going up, but the property values weren't. So there was a while there where I was questioning it. And you had the same experience. I know Alex sold some of his.
Yeah.
Well, it's more than compensated now. In the last couple of years, it's rallied, and it's rallied fast.
Yeah, so it's good that we're all there and we've had sort of upside benefit. I have a lot more property in Queensland these days than what I do in New South Wales at a sort of numbers level. But so let's give a sense then, Mitch, before we get into too many more details, your portfolio today. The last time I had you in on the show, 2019, pre-COVID, total value of your portfolio was about 8.22 million with 1.7 million bucks in equity.
Yes.
So you're rolling at an LVR at about sort of 79 or 80%. And back then you thought, hey, this is pretty good. I'm going somewhere. This is, how many years ago is that? That's like 5 years ago, right? Yeah. Tell me what the portfolio is today.
Okay, as of today, it's 13.319 million top line with 7.6 million equity, and the LVR is a healthy 46.5.
Okay, God. So it's about 5.5 million bucks in debt in the portfolio.
About that.
So 5.5 million bucks in debt to control $13.3 million in assets. Is the portfolio positively geared, or is it still costing you a few bucks pre-tax?
The holding costs are going up. It's almost like this state and federal government, it's almost like they're trying to balance their mismanagement through hitting the investor. And every time they do it, our holding costs go up and we push the rents, and it's not stopping. So the holding, it's about neutral.
Yeah, okay.
Which, if you go back many years, if you had even 5-6 years ago, if you had an LVR of 46.5, you're cash positive. Yeah. Those days are gone.
Yeah. And this is one of the myths of resi property, and I'm sort of getting a bit stuck into it lately because I get a little bit frustrated with how property is being positioned at the moment, outside the scope of this particular podcast. But you just got to be very, very careful. The perception that a lot of people have on property is it coming into their social media feeds, and everyone's getting rich in property and cash flow positive properties, buy today, and from your first and second properties you're going to have a cash flow positive portfolio. Like, it's not true. It's not true unless you're buying maybe bed sits in Broken Hill, which are never going to give you any capital growth if you want to try and chase positively geared portfolios from the get-go and creating $100,000 of positive income in your portfolio. It's just it's not true. It's not true. You know, and people are going to call me up and give me a hard time saying, you don't know what you're doing, Phil. That's fair enough. And if you want to come and have a chat with me on the podcast and talk about it, I'd be more than happy to do it. But it's okay if your portfolio is negatively geared, particularly if you're new to investing. Like you're saying now, you've got an LVR under 50%, right? Resi. This is all resi, right?
Yep.
Under 50%.
Two commercial.
Oh, two commercials, sorry. Under 50% on $13 million in value, and it's neutral at best, and no doubt.
Neutral at best.
And I've seen the way you manage your portfolio. It's very detailed. You're counting everything, right? Everything is in there. Neutral's pretty good for that. And I imagine the commercial stuff's probably helping quite a lot, by the way.
The commercial does help. It really does help. And because the two commercials are worth 1.1 each, and their debt is down to 350 on both of those.
Okay, that's pretty good.
On those two lots. So, and the rents are quite high. But I'm glad you brought up what you mentioned with the false economy and what you see on Facebook feeds. I really do think there should be an accountability, because what is being sold, and people are putting sometimes the biggest investment they'll make of their life. And from doing this myself and what you've seen, I think we're both somewhat experienced, you a lot more than me. I've learned from you, but it's false. And I think that they could destroy a lot of lives if they sell that image, because people buy into it and then realise, actually, it is costing me each week.
It is costing each week, right? But you've got to rationalise that. And I still talk about the Smart Property Investment Portfolio. I did a podcast recently with Victor Kumar, who you know, over at Right Property Group, and him and Steve Waters, a dear friend of ours, recently departed, worked with us on building that portfolio, right? And it's always been negatively geared.
Always. It's
always been negatively geared. And we grew that portfolio into maybe 17 properties. We sold down about 4 or 5 of them in Sydney a couple of years ago. It's still negatively geared, not as much as what it was, but it's still negatively geared. Yes. And that's because it's held in trusts and there's a lot of costs connected with it, like, land tax and accounting fees and all that sort of stuff, right? And sometimes a bit of a premium on your interest rates. It's still negatively geared, but it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. I can live with it. I'm deal with it. But that's the reality of it. So it's good. And this is why I like bringing property investors onto the portfolio who actually have real and what would be considered a large portfolio to give the realities of it all. But let's talk about the realities of it. So 8.22 million was the VAL last time you were in, 1.7 million equity, 80% LVR. That's pretty good going. Now 13.3 million value, 7.6 mil in equity. And that's based on bank. They're not Mitchell Burge made up valuations. They're bank vals based on the current refinancing that you're going through. So over the last 5 years, you've increased your equity in this portfolio by $5.83 million.
Yes. Or 1.16 million a year, or 22 grand a week.
So you've thought about this?
Yes.
22 grand a week. You just go, well, that's, 90 grand a month, call it, right?
Yes.
It's not possible. How's that? They have to be made up numbers. Like, $90,000 a month for doing nothing. Really?
Well, it's not really nothing.
I know.
If you look, to me, it still doesn't feel real. And the figures are in front of you. You can see the figures. When I first read that article and went on that trip with Alex, I was just lucky enough to have mentors like you guys and the late Steve Waters and Victor and Munzerl, who were well advanced in this and had been doing it. So I'd seen it. I'd witnessed it. But if I ever thought it would go this far, no. I still look at that and I can see the figures on paper, but I'm still making massive loan payments. So to me, that money is not real because it's on paper.
Yeah.
And what is real is my outgoings.
Yeah.
So I guess you could call it asset risk. I'm not cash poor, but you feel that way. And I think that's a healthy way to live. It stops you from being reckless.
It is a healthy way to live. And you frame it. It's paper profit, right? In order to realise, for you to realise the total equity in this portfolio, which is $7.6 million, for you to realise that would take a lot of hard work and a lot of tax.
Yeah.
And a lot of payments to do that.
Yes.
For that to land in your bank account will take time, energy, and effort.
Oh, yes.
But why would you want to do it though? This is the point. if you're able to control $30 million in real estate at a largely neutral position,
Do nothing.
you don't need to do anything.
Nothing.
You're set. You're set on that.
In 10 years from now, that $5 million debt, I think, what is it, 5.5, will probably be down to 3 or something.
So you've got P9 mortgages, have you?
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm also making, particularly my primary.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because it doesn't really matter. It's all debt. But I want my primary residency paid off. And it's just a mental thing. It's not a business thing. I just want it paid off. But say that drops in 10 years down to about 3 million.
Yeah.
That 13.3 will very likely turn into 26.6.
Yeah. And you'll be holding about $3 million of debt to
And the
control
debt just
26.
disappears, yes.
Yeah, 26 million. So,
Covering the next 2 generations.
well, it's not a bad spot to be.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe you should sell it all and just go travelling, mate. That's what a lot of people.
Honestly, I think about it, but I love my job.
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
work with some good people. I like my job.
Do you think you'll work? Just keep working?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think people like you and myself that do this are wired that way. Doesn't mean we don't go and have stupidly extravagant holidays now and then to justify it, but it's just how we're wired.
Yeah.
Because this is not easy.
No.
When you have a tenant that smashes a house to pieces or doesn't pay, and you've got the real estate agent saying it's another hot water heater, it's not a walk in the park. And that's why it takes a lot of management. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of accounting bills. It's a lot of spreadsheets. It's not easy. But you can see here, you can't work a job and earn that. And there is another side. So if we go back to when I was in here in 19, you can see it was 8.2 million top and 1.77
yeah.
equity. That equity was quite low and the LVR was up around the 80. But you can see I haven't bought that much since then. But what you can see, just by doing nothing and the run on the market, it has increased and dropped the LVR. So I think it comes a certain point where you need to know when to not be greedy.
Yeah.
And just let it mature.
Just stop.
Just stop.
Just stop. You know, you get to a point where, you know, and you know, I'll chat about it a bit on this podcast where I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with property because I talk a fair bit about it, pretty involved with it. You know, I'm not a great property investor myself. I'm not that active, you know, and most of the time it's a nuisance and it's such an afterthought. It would be a percent of my bandwidth or time I would put towards the portfolio, the property investment portfolio that I have, and that's okay, right? Because it's a good portfolio.
It's a good portfolio. It's set.
It's good. It's a good portfolio. But then I sit there and just go, I'm sick of it, and then I. Go back to what I'm seeing on social media and some of the rhetoric around it. I just go, I just don't like in many ways how this industry is developing and the way it's being positioned and portrayed. I've got some concerns about it. That said, I come back to the point where property as an asset class has been, you know, very successful for generations of people. And as an asset class, I back it. It's where I hold the majority of my wealth outside of business. But when I get sort of frustrated with it, annoyed by it, and I don't want to talk to real estate agents about lifting a rent by $10 a week, you know, people are going to go, woe is you, Phil. It's a real first world problem. I sit there and I get my capital growth calculator out, compounding capital growth calculator out. When I get pissed off with it all, I plug in some numbers and I go, oh, yeah, it's a really good way to rationalise it. So all of the headaches and hassles of investing in property, if you come back to the point of what is the objective, and that is capital growth that doesn't cost you too much to manufacture. That's all property investment is. If anyone tells you anything different, they're making it overcomplicated. The game is capital growth without it costing you too much to hold that capital growth opportunity. That's all it is. You're doing it well. 22 grand a week, mate. It's pretty good. Be nice if that was coming in cash though, wouldn't it?
It would be very nice if it was cash.
Yeah.
But again, it's on paper and I don't look at it like that. Most of these houses I've never seen. It's no different to somebody buying stock.
I've never seen one property I own in Queensland.
And you don't need to.
Never seen them. I've even driven past a suburb on the way somewhere and just went, you don't know to see it.
Yes, my business partner's in the Gold Coast working remotely and I drove through parts of Brisbane where most of mine are a couple of weeks ago and I didn't stop by.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I think it would change my perception of what is just an investment.
Welcome back, Phil Tarrant, chatting with Mitchell Burge, property investor and also mechanical What do you call it? Mechanical
contract.
mechanical air conditioning.
Air conditioning and ventilation.
Air conditioning. But you like doing resi stuff.
Love resi.
I'm speaking to you guys about maybe put some air conditioning in one of my joints. So they do come highly recommended. These guys are licensed to chill. Google them, you can track them. I'm sure Mitch will be happy to have a chat with you. But this is not a plug for your business, Mitch. I'm here to talk about your property portfolio. So you're doing all right. Have you done enough? No more? Is that it?
In saying that, when I was commenting previously that you need to know when to stop, I do have a little block of land inside Newcastle, which is going to settle in the next couple of months. But I put the deposit down in 2019.
Oh, okay.
So it's off the plan.
Yeah.
I put down $50,000. It's a $500,000 block. You get almost 5 years of growth out of it before it comes, and then I can, because of inflation and cost of building, I can make a really quick assessment when it settles. Do I want to hold it? I can offload it and make a few dollars very quickly, or I may build, but I'm not fussed.
Yeah. Okay. And what would you be able to sell the block for, do you reckon?
I have no idea.
No.
Honestly,
the issue you have, though, if you're holding, so you've been waiting, it must be some sort of greenfields development where you bought it off the plan, they're doing all the civil works and getting it ready for the housing and stuff. There's some tax implications if you're holding vacant blocks of land as well, right? You know, so you got to do something. Otherwise, the tax man is going to come and say, "Mate, we're trying to build houses. You can't just sit here on vacant blocks."
There is, but it's still not real to me yet because at the moment it's just a $50,000 deposit that was paid in 2019 roughly, and it's now 5 years later, and I haven't had to do a thing. But I'm sure there would have been a lot of growth in that time.
You'd hope so. Otherwise, you've had $50,000 doing nothing for you. This is one of the challenges with off
Everything's
the
a
plan
gamble.
You know,
sometimes you win. Around Rudy Hill and places like that, I heard stories of people where the developers were trying to buy it back off them at a premium. Some developments, this is probably not that, but you've got to be in it to try.
Yeah. Well, it's good to mix it up a little bit. But so that's the only real thing you got out there, which is portfolio growth or change. Again, for my own selfish needs, I don't really want the market to change too much. I don't want the rates to come down right now, because don't quote me on this. I'm not a professional investor by any means, but I think every basis point comes down, lendability goes up about 10%, and common sense tells me when there's so many good professionals out there with savings that can't even qualify for $1 million loan right now, the second the lendability comes down, the same percentage of what they can borrow, the market's going to go up. So which is good if you got property and you're pretty well set. So how many in this portfolio again? Sorry, about
16, I think.
16 properties. Yeah. Okay, and a lot of them in Queensland. Just don't they go through specific? What sort of suburbs are you in? What sort of properties are they?
Crestmead, Woodridge, Ipswich, all the ones that you really don't want to get in that have done us very well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what are they, sort of houses or townhouses?
So we did a mix. When we started, obviously, I was a small operator. Cash flow was a thing, because if you go in too negative geared, you'll never buy again because you got to outlay too much cash. So we typically did a unit to get cash flow, and then we did a house, which will get you more capital growth, but the lower yield and return, but which would be offset by a unit. So it's sort of more houses now than units, but in the beginning it was mostly units to get the cash flow. Yeah,
and it's sort of pigeon pairing, right?
Yeah.
Is the concept of that, where you got a capital growth property complemented with a more yielding cash flow property, so you hold both as an asset and
Correct.
You get different things. Okay, so you got much outside of Queensland?
Yeah, Sydney.
Okay.
And I am looking at Melbourne possibly soon.
The next big thing.
Yeah, so I'm quite proud of my niece at the moment. She's only 23. She's saved nearly $240,000 working at IGA, paid her HECS debt.
What?
Yep, worked in IGA since she was 14.
240 grand.
Yep, she's paid her HECS, bought herself a nice car, and currently right now, Victor from the Right Group just found her a block in the outskirts of Melbourne.
Okay.
It's about 900 squares, and it's got 3 lots on it, all rented, under rented, and enough space to build one out the back for $680K. So from what I've been learning and looking,
that'll be cash flow positive off the go.
Oh yeah.
So that's yes, you can still find these things, right? You can still find. That sounds like a good buy.
Oh yeah.
If you're tuning into this, Victor, where's mine, mate?
I actually said that to Victor. I went, this one is unbelievable. Yeah. I had one look at it and I went, why didn't you do this for me? In saying that, look what he's created for me. The late Steve.
We like Victor. It's all in jest,
we do love Victor, but this, I'm very proud of what she's done. But she's setting herself up from 23 for life, and this is costing 680,000. But there is an opportunity in Melbourne right now, which I find interesting. They've had a very poor state government for 2 consecutive terms. It's their own fault. It's a democracy. They voted for them. They've too much of a percentage of Victoria's income, from what I understand, comes from property transactions and taxes.
Yeah, I think by memory there's like 16 related property taxes in and they just keep making new ones, right?
They're not balancing the books, and they can't run an economy.
I got my land tax bill in Victoria recently. I was like, that's changed things.
Well, they're just trying to rape the investor. They're just trying to make up the money from wherever they can get it from.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for them, what it's meant is the investor has gone where it's easier. They've gone to Queensland. Yeah. Even though Queensland suffers a little bit from the same. They've stayed in Sydney, where they've had good returns. They've gone to Tassie. Perth, look at Perth. Why is Perth run so hard when the second biggest capital city should have been charging? It's got the second most migration rate. It should be performing, but it's just poor management. But because of that, we've found evidence of certain areas there, which Vic put this from the Right Group put the study in front of me, and he showed me, and it's real, that there's certain areas where there's almost been no growth in 5 years. So imagine you're an investor in 2019, you bought, you got hit with inflation, interest rate, taxes, and you've had no capital gain. Some people are at the point they're broken or they just want out.
And you've got to remember also some of the draconian laws through COVID where you couldn't evict.
Yeah.
You couldn't evict a tenant, and if they couldn't pay their rent because of COVID, too bad.
And it's damaged their whole economy. If you look at Victoria, they are suffering from this because as an investor, I look there and I don't see a safe bet.
Yeah.
But at the moment, the same thing that's created this terrible situation has meant that the market is that damaged. It's also an opportunity because history shows us that every time a government overreaches, they pull back. And it's only going to take a few strikes of a pen to realise what they've done.
So there's some good value investing down there right now, but I think you're going to have to work hard to find places like that. So three different things. What is it, like an old?
It was clearly at some point a house.
Yeah.
They've knocked it about 10, 15 years ago. I think it's 15 years ago. They put up 3 small villas, about 2 bedroom each, 1 driveway. They're all side by side.
Like a little townhouse development.
Yeah, and there's enough space out the back to put 1 more. And the best thing is they're all separate, so you could sell them off individually if you needed to.
So they're all separately structured.
1 sale,
yeah,
but all 3 in 1 hit. But they're all separate. So the way it's been in the contract, I'm not going to pretend to understand it. I'm just a tradie. But it's that you could sell anyone at any one time.
So it's a strated block in some ways. It must be.
It's not strated.
No.
No.
Oh, so they're all individual titles.
Individual titles on the one block. So you could sell them off individually and build one out the back. But this is what you pay the
goodbye station for, yeah.
This is what you pay for. You can't. I would never find this. I'd have to fly down there, annoy agents when they've got the right buyers agents, the right ones. There's not many good ones out there. Have their hand in the pie with every agent. They know where the market's moving, and that's what you're paying them the big dollars for.
Yeah,
it's a big fee, but look what they found.
Yeah, and she potentially. So that wouldn't be. Be pretty close to positively geared, I would imagine. But
she's putting down $200,000 deposit.
Yeah, okay. On what? What's the purchase price?
$680.
Okay, so she's putting the full deposit down. So she's going to be starting off with the LVR in the 70s.
She said we're already going to be planning in the next year or two what she's doing next.
But and this guy, how old is she? 23, right?
Yeah.
This goes to the point that you hear all the time. It's impossible to get into property for young people. Blah 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 blah. Right?
I'm tired of hearing that.
Like she's worked at IGA.
Yes.
Through school and uni. Right, she's paid her HECS debt off.
No HECS debt.
No HECS debt, right? So she's paid for that as well, right?
Owns a car.
Owns a car, investing in property, and guess what? She's probably going to be able to go to Europe for a month and do what young people do in Europe for a month in the summer.
100%.
So it is possible, but
yes.
I'm sure she's worked hard.
Well, it's interesting you raise
Does she
this.
still live at home with mum and dad and stuff?
Yeah, which is the only way you can do this.
Yeah.
And, of course, paying rent, but working a lot of hours, night shifts. So IGA, the way she did it was working a lot of night shifts where you're getting the extra and started at 14, now 23. That's a lot of years of savings.
So it's nearly 10 years working at IGA.
Yeah.
Like, check out chick. She's probably a store manager now, I would imagine, because she does so much.
Well, she's finished uni and now is a nurse.
Okay.
But you can see, I hear a lot of people these days, the victim mentality I'd like to break. I've done it. She's doing it right now. And there's many people I learned from you guys. There's always a way. It doesn't matter. In this city, we're in I think the second wealthiest country in the world in the capital city with the Upper North Shore on our doorstep, there is no excuse. Yes, things are expensive, but you can make a lot of money. There's a construction site next door which you could walk into tomorrow and get $40 an hour with a shovel, no questions. And they can't find staff.
Yeah.
So when I hear people crying poor, I don't really want to hear it. And I do understand that the percentage of real estate income has gone up over the years. We all know that.
Yeah.
And it's unrealistic, I think, that a lot of people, even somebody on $200,000-$300,000 a year, can buy $1 million house straight off the bat in Sydney. But you can do this.
Yeah.
Now, you can see what she's done with that property. She'll probably buy another one in 2 years or 3 years. And it starts a journey where 10 years from now, she could have a portfolio that's very large and possibly choose to cash out and buy back into Sydney outright.
Yeah, and this is the utility of property investment as an enabler for choices in the future.
Yes.
Like that, by doing that, you're much better off than sitting around complaining about it. The issue I have, Mitch, is you say it, I say it, people tuning into this get it, but this is an echo sounding booth, right? Like the people who are tuning into this podcast are the people who actually have got it. And they're going, oh, hang on a second, I can actually work hard and do this and do that and buy property and set myself up. The people who sit around and complain about their lot in life do not listen to this podcast. On the other hand, a lot of them are militant against people who invest in property because it's wrecking all their choices in life because they're making property unaffordable. You've just showed us that property is affordable for a 23-year-old.
Well, it is, and you can either be on one side of the renter or the landlord. Where will you rather be?
Yeah.
So you can be the victim, or you can actually be proactive and own the situation and control it.
Yeah. Again, it's we're singing to the thing here, and so people who are tuning into this, yes, it can be done. And my comments and remarks around sort of positive or negative gear portfolio. Yes, you can find in isolation positive gear properties like that, but if you're going to grow that portfolio and extract equity out of it and grow it rapidly, it's going to be a point in time where your portfolio is negatively geared, and that's okay.
And that's okay, but you can always find somewhere, if you are on lower income and you don't want to work nights or a second job, that's okay. But exactly what you said, you can find somewhere that's positively geared that won't get you the growth. But even now, if you're 25 years old and you buy an apartment worth $350,000 or $400,000, a single bedder in Logan, and you do nothing else for the rest of your days and you pay that down, if you have another 30, 40 years working, 50 years, that is enough to sustain you in retirement if you do nothing else.
Sounds pretty easy. So for you then, maybe some purchases next year in Victoria, Melbourne. Maybe,
yes, possibly. I want to somewhat follow in Alex's stead. I don't want to or need to sell down the portfolio.
Yeah.
But I'd like transactions moving forward to be like more what you've done.
Yeah, bigger stuff.
Bigger.
Yeah.
Higher quality.
Yeah. And this is a natural
land bank.
Yeah, this is a natural evolution for most investors as well. You start investing off, you ain't got too much, so you're buying the stuff that's affordable, and you get to a point where you realise it's not the number of properties in your portfolio, it's the inherent value and growth potential of those assets. So I would much rather have multi-million-dollar investment properties today and have fewer of them than having lots of cheaper properties.
Less
right?
management.
Less management, less headaches, less everything, right? So, and that's okay. And you can't compare your chapter 1 with someone's chapter 6, say for you, or you're probably a chapter 5, you still got quite a lot of time left in investing, as do I. But that's what you do when you get to that point in time. You start sort of buying commercial properties at higher values, and you concentrate a lot more on income generation as well as capital growth. So that's a natural way to be. So I guess the stuff you'll buy in the future will probably be high value and less of them.
That's why I don't want the rates to change right now, because I know that market will
that market's good at the moment.
Yeah, that market's very good.
Whereas on the other side, people who are probably starting off investing and probably buying investment properties are all buying in Perth at the moment. And if you started in Perth 18 months ago, 2 years ago, you're buying stuff with a 3 in front of it or a 4. Now you're buying stuff with 6s and 7s in front of it, right?
Well, I bought one in Perth in 2020 for, I think it was 320, which is now 630.
Yeah, there you go.
It's that's a very fast gain.
It is. And the big question now is, have you missed Perth, right? People are saying, well, I ain't got too much more to give. So it's all about where you choose to deploy your money. But Mitch, thanks for coming in and having a chat with us, mate.
Perfect.
We'll get you in again at some point. We didn't really talk about structures and stuff, but you do a lot of trust-based lending.
Yes.
About borrowing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything's in separate identities and set up for tax reasons. And
and also probably asset transfer in time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's handy.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm trying to set up the next couple of generations.
In what basis? Just as like cash or just,
I do. I'm going to contradict what I said earlier a little bit. You can always get into the market somewhere. But I read an article a couple of weeks ago that I found fascinating. It was a picture of a couple on the eastern suburbs in the 1960s that got outbid saying, we'll never afford in Sydney.
Yeah.
This has always been this way. It's not going to change, but there's no hiding. The percentage of income to mortgage payments every year goes up and up.
Yeah.
So I look at my kids and the world they're being born into and property going up, and I don't want them to be a slave to mortgage, but I don't want them to have a golden ticket. So ultimately, I'd like to, at some point in a trust, say there's a block of land, you can build on it.
Yeah.
I don't want them to have to work for the rest of their lives just to be a slave to property.
Yeah.
If I can help that.
Fair enough. It's not a bad spot to be. Don't give them too much though.
No,
you want to work in an IGA for 10 years to save 200 odd grand. That's what you want, right?
No, and I can't give them too much. Fishing's expensive.
So you're still getting out on your boat?
Yeah. So Alex and I just got back from a trip up at Crowdy Head for a week. That was good.
How was that? Good?
Really good.
Yeah.
Really
you get
good.
much?
Yeah, I went up there for the whole week. I fished Monday through to Sunday.
God. I went fishing for the first time in about 4 years last week. Caught nothing.
You need to go with Alex.
Yeah, I was with him. I don't think the conditions were very good, allegedly. So, anyway, it was good to get out. It's a nice day. Drank a couple of beers, which is always good. But Mitch Burge, thanks for coming in, mate.
Thank you for having me. And it's been 5 years. And
fast forward 5 years, you're probably going to be knocking on the door of $20 million
probably
in equity.
Very, very likely.
Happy days. It's good. Keep racking it up. There's $1 million in nearly $1.2 million in capital growth a year. That
accelerates.
It compounds, right?
It's compounded.
That's the beauty of it. Get your compounding calculator out, work it out. That's the Smart Property Investment Show. These are the conversations we're having with property investors doing what they do. Mitch's portfolio, I would say, is certainly on the sophisticated side. It wouldn't represent what most property investors' portfolios look like. It's it's towards the top end of it all, but it can be done. Hard work, energy, effort, focus, patience. I always call it strategic patience, because if you buy the right stuff and you don't overextend, you can be able to hold on. This is what happens with property investment. Lots of stories like this. You can go and have a look at Smart Property Investment portfolio as well. Lots of podcasts on as well. Very similar story. smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.